You're tuning into the Wild, Weird, and Sometimes Normal podcast. If you have a story or a guest recommendation that you think others need to hear, email me at wildweirdandsometimesnormal@gmail.com. Let's get this started. Alex and Brett, kick it!
Wild. Wild. Weird. And sometimes wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. And sometimes normal.
On this episode, I'm joined by Enrica Jang, and we discuss all things Edgar Allan Poe. Enrica is the executive director of Poe Baltimore, the Edgar Allan Poe House and Museum in West Baltimore, and in October, they're hosting the Poe Festival. It's an annual festival that is a weekend-long event, and there's some really cool exhibits and things to do planned. We discuss Poe's life and death, and even correct some of the misinformation out there about Edgar. Was Poe a madman? A drunk? Did he die in the gutter? We get to the bottom of these rumors and celebrate one of America's greatest writers. In true wild and weird fashion, we also touch on any Poe ghost sightings. Give the Poe House a follow on social media and let them know you heard about them on Wild and Weird. Enjoy the show. Are you looking for CBD for your pet? My friends at Pure Pet Wellness have what you need. They use the highest quality ingredients. While other companies may use synthetic oils in their CBD, Pure Pet Wellness uses organic ingredients. Organically grown hemp, organic coconut oil, organic shea butter, organic beeswax, and that's just to name a few. A family-owned and operated company that also offers fast shipping. Go to purepetwellness.com for all your pet's CBD needs and use the discount code WILD and WEIRD at checkout. That's WILD, A-N-D, WEIRD. Treat your animal right. Go to purepetwellness.com. Are you looking to buy a home in New Jersey, escape the city and move to the suburbs? Finally purchase a vacation home on the lake or down the shore? Maybe you're one of the lucky ones who are retiring and moving out of state. If so, let me help you. Keller Williams and the Real Estate Professional Group have what you need to make your goals come true. Reach out and have a conversation with someone who will put you first. Contact Brian McCoach at 856-321-1212 or email brianmccoach@kw.com. Welcome to another episode of Wild, Weird, and Sometimes Normal. I'm your host, Brian. And today my guest is Enrica Jang. She is the executive director of Poe Baltimore and the Edgar Allan Poe House and Museum. We're going to talk all things Edgar Allan Poe today. Welcome.
Thank you very, very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for coming on. So you guys in Baltimore, I love Baltimore. Go down there a few times, been down there. Inner Harbor is great. And Fells Point, so much fun over there. You just you can stay overnight and bounce around, seafood and different bars you can bounce in and out of. A lot of fun over there. Are you located near there?
Not near Fells Point. We're actually on the other side of town, but it is a great city. We are a tiny house museum in West Baltimore, closer to the B&O Railroad Museum. And Baltimore, it's called Small-Timore. It's an intimate city in a lot of ways. You have your different neighborhoods and stuff like that, but everything is just sort of interconnected and it is easy to get around, and it's a cool place to be.
Yeah, I think it's like a 2-hour drive from Philadelphia, maybe hour 45.
There.
Yep, nice and easy to get down there.
Yeah.
So in some of my Edgar Allan Poe research, I had no idea that he lived in Philadelphia. And I'm going to take a field trip over there. They have his house preserved, and I think it's a museum. Let's go over there and check this out.
It is. Poe in his lifetime never owned property. Now that he's dead, you can visit 3 of the houses that he lived in. So the one in Baltimore, Poe House, is the last surviving home in the city where Poe and his family were known to have lived. There is the one in Philadelphia run by the National Park Service. Highly recommend a visit. It's really, really great. Ask them what's under the floorboards. And then you can go all the way up to New York, and there's a Poe cottage in the Bronx. Really, really great visit. Wonderful place. And that, unfortunately, is where Poe's wife, Virginia, passed away, the house that she died. And you can actually see the bed that she died in. If you go down to Richmond, a wonderful museum to Poe in Richmond, Virginia. He also lived there. And they have all the really cool Poe stuff. Really wonderful museum. They just celebrated their 100th anniversary. So you can do the entire Poe pilgrimage up and down the East Coast and see these wonderful places. Not a Poe house, though, in Richmond. It's one of the advantages we have over them. They're not a Poe House. But in Baltimore, his father's family from Baltimore, deep family roots for Poe there. And he lives there now. He died there. So we have the body. That's another, Baltimore really loves Poe, and we have him. So there you go.
That's great. I saw that, I guess, annually, some people leave flowers and liquor for him at his gravesite.
I would say every day, but yes,
Wow.
you're correct. No, but annually on his Poe's birthday, there is a kind of ceremony. It's more ceremonial now. There was a mysterious figure called the Poe Toaster. The tradition was that the Poe Toaster would steal into the cemetery at midnight on Poe's birthday, leave cognac and roses on Poe's grave. But that tradition, unfortunately, kind of officially stopped in 2009, and now it's more ceremonial to hire someone to come out and do it. But it's if you want to hang out in a cemetery in January, it's a really cool place to be. And then in October, for Poe's death date, we have the International Edgar Allan Poe Festival. So got your choice.
Wonderful. And what year is this for the festival?
This is year 6 for the festival. Super excited about that. During the pandemic, we went virtual for 2020, just like everybody else. But year 6 for this really cool event.
What do you guys have going on for the festival?
Well, Poe Festival, 2 days, books, music, vendors, food, a stage, celebrating just about anything Edgar Allan Poe. We have a free program. The event is free to the public, right in front of the Edgar Allan Poe House. And we have several different performers from all over the country, some folks even coming in internationally this year. And you get to hang out with fellow Poe folks. Again, that festival is free during the day. And then over the weekend, we also have ticketed events, the Black Cat Ball, our gala event at Westminster Hall, where Poe is buried. That is a lot of fun, the official party of the festival. And we do tours of Poe House, and all of this benefits the museum.
That's really cool. Does the rest of the city get involved and have like offshoot events?
It is. We're sort of taking over the city. Like October is always Poe-tober in the city of Baltimore anyway, because you just have, you mentioned Fells Point. It's a really great place. There's a place that claims to be Poe's last stop. Well, you can argue about whether or not that's in fact true, but they do a lot of really cool stuff in Fells Point. You have a lot of ghost tours. You have different performers, different theaters doing lots of different things. And very slowly kind of like creeping over into other locations in the city. So working with the National Edgar Allan Poe Theater this year for a movie night, Friday night, and we do an exhibit. This year's going to be a Poe in Comics exhibit at Westminster Hall, and that's for an entire week. And then, of course, near Halloween, people have Poe on the brain all through the entire month of October. So
I would say maybe high level Poe knowledge, The Raven, great poem, and some of his stories, I've had to read through high school and college and things like that. And always entertaining. And then so the last week I've just kind of, been doing a little bit of a deeper dive and learning some more. So one, very complete shock to me. Like I just assumed his middle name was Allen. I didn't realize that he was adopted by another family, not officially adopted, I guess. And then their surname was Allen. And so he was Edgar Poe, then Edgar Allan Poe. I always thought it was just a 3, John Wilkes Booth type of deal, like just a middle name. Completely wrong here.
Well, Poe, yes, he was taken in by this foster family, never formally adopted. And that actually does become an important part of his biography, because when his foster father passes away, he's like one of 3 wealthiest men in Virginia. He dies and leaves Edgar nothing, leaves his foster son nothing. And so that's a significant part of Poe's biography. But yeah, no, he was born Edgar Poe. And that's where the Allen comes from. During his lifetime, he signed his name Edgar A. Poe. Kind of hang on to that name, but sort of an indication of probably what he thought of it.
So his stepfather was taking the Bill Gates approach, where they're saying they're giving their children nothing and giving it all away. And you're like, I was I hit the lottery by being born in this family, and you're giving me 0? Yep, you have to work like the rest of us, I guess,
Kind of. I think in this instance, it's really sort of that typical clash of personalities between a foster father who he was, Scottish immigrant, Presbyterian, a merchant. Nickname was Jock. He was very much practical, pragmatic, just man of his time. Whereas if you can imagine the kind of sullen teenager that an Edgar Allan Poe would have been, kind of the original emo kid, might feel a little pity for John Allen and kind of like that clash of personalities. But John Allen wanted Poe to be grateful, for everything that had been given. He wanted him to, this should sound familiar to a lot of folks, that I wanted his foster son to be aware that he was very lucky and given a lot of opportunities that John Allan himself had not had. And that's, a lament, a typical lament of a parent. Whereas for Poe, for Edgar, he was 2.5 when he's taken in by this family. And he's a foster son, never formally adopted, and never allowed to forget it. So you have a young man who doesn't understand why his family is not his family. It's not like when he was 2 years old, he said, oh, well, thanks for wanting to take me in, give me a house, but I'm fine. I can take it from here. We're cool. Like, they made the decision to take him in. They, and yet they wanted him to be sort of grateful. And then Poe really loved his foster mother, kind of eyed a little bit of the infidelity on John Allan's side, and very much a do as I say, not as I do kind of man. And the two were sort of had this inevitable clash when Edgar's in his teens. Later, John Allan just cut him out.
Wow. Well, you have to pull yourself by your bootstraps and all those other great sayings, but that's a little rough, And also kind of like the Harry Potter background of like, oh, you're living with us, but like you're not a part of us. And the occasional time that we'll show affection is going to be offshoot by, a hard discipline or a hard attitude or a reminder that you're not one of us.
Right. And that's I think a lot of people can identify with that story. You either had that parent or you have that kid that you don't understand. And both of you have a point of view. And that's the great challenge of our time, right? Seeing other people's point of view and figuring out how to, how to get along. So we see that with Poe. And for a young man who never could feel that his home was really his home, that his family was really his family, that kind of insecurity to be raised by that's not something that just goes away. So the struggle there.
So some of Poe's writings are a little dark, you're saying, the emo kid type of thing. So that would be fair that he's, in that sadness phase. And then you're looking towards, a darker, I guess, type of outset on life. Where's he drawing inspiration from when he starts becoming a writer?
Well, I do share with people that while there are elements of Poe's life definitely tragic, and he could be the brooding poet, I also like to point out the kind of gallows humor that we see in Poe, and this kind of lightness and teasing tone. Sometimes Cask of Amontillado is one of my favorite examples, where you have this murderer who's just very light and airy about this ghastly thing that he's doing. And then at the end of the story, you realize he got away with it. Everything that happened was 50 years ago. And he's been walking free and just fine with all of it ever since. That is a kind of, again, that gallows humor and glee that you see a little bit of with Poe. There are some people who confuse the persona of Poe's writing with the man himself. And he had an entire career as an editor, had an entire career as a contributor to the magazines that employed him, had a lot to say about literature and writing. And it's very clear that he's very intentional in the effect that he's trying to create in his work. So rather than being a passive to his gift, he's a master of the text. He's a master of drawing these emotions out of the reader. And that's why these stories kind of stay with us. So I think he likely was inspired by some of the darkness in his life, but this is a man of great humor, a man of incredible intellect, and just power in the writing. And I think that's why he endures. So, but writers draw from just about everywhere, right? So it's hard to know. He was a voracious reader. He had, a lot to say about literature of his time. There's a whole body of work from Poe that is never read today because it's all, book criticism and a commentary on other writers, this kind of stuff. It's not what is assigned to students. They read the short stories and the poems. They don't see a lot of Poe's criticism. And he's the inventor of the detective story. So quite a life of accomplishment for a man who died at the age of 40.
I feel like I have 4 questions out of that. But one, his criticism of the contemporary books that he was reviewing, in hindsight, are they looked upon as fair, the reviews, or did he skew? Was he extra hard on people to bring himself around? I'm trying to get it, I guess.
I think so. In Poe's day, he was known, he kind of makes his bones early in his career as a vicious book critic. He's known for being really sharp and acerbic about other writers. Sometimes a bit of a hypocrite too, because he would criticize some of these folks for committing some sins that he himself commits in his work, even getting a little personal, like about their appearance and this kind of stuff. Poe is in his later 20s at this time, early 30s. He's a young writer, kind of punching up. And again, I joke about this. He's almost like the original hipster. All the things that you might think were cool about literature, he would explain to you why they were not cool and what you should be reading instead. And he was known for that. And makes a reputation around that. Not just a writer of Gothic tales, but is noted for his very strong opinions. He's a proponent for American letters. The country is very young at this time. His grandparents served in the Revolution. So the country is very, very young. This is pre-Civil War. And he wanted Americans to embrace their own literary tradition. He felt that the Americans were a little too beholden to the British and to Europe. So they should be embracing an American tradition. He was a big proponent for Southern letters, raised in Richmond. New England he considered the gatekeepers of literature at the time. And so he kind of railed against that a bit. But do I think he was fair? Some of the writers that he wrote about, I've never even heard of, but we've all heard about Edgar Allan Poe. So I think it gives you a sense of he was probably a better authority on some of this stuff.
I like that it sounds that Poe would fit perfectly in this time. He's like one of the original emo, fits in with the hipsters, and then kind of also seems like maybe like a Twitter troll a little bit if he's sitting here and like picking on people's appearances and grabbing through their books as he's going through their works.
Maybe.
I'm becoming more of a fan as we go on here. Yeah.
He liked to he tried to perpetrate a couple of hoaxes in the magazines to try to trick the public and stuff like that. So would he have kind of fit in? Probably.
He invented fake news. This is amazing.
Did not invent it, but he certainly was a proud bearer of the tradition. So
there you go. Yeah. Was he recognized for, now he's looked at as a great American writer.
Sure.
Was he recognized in his time, or is this after his death that he was given more acclaim?
I think he was recognized by the reading public in his day for the early part of his career. Like I said, he makes his bones as, this critic, kind of known to the reading public. So if can rattle off the names of like maybe some reporters for the New Yorker or, somebody who's at that level would have recognized him. He becomes popularly famous with the publication of The Raven. Even if you didn't know anything about poetry or care, and not everybody cares about poetry. They should, but not everybody does. You would have heard The Raven. It was like a pop song, very romantic, Gothic. The repetition in like sort of like that sort of musical nevermore, nevermore, like this, captures the imagination of the nation, flies around the world. It makes him popularly famous. It's almost like a pop song. So, but this is 4 years before he died. So it's hard to know where his career would have gone had he been able to continue. And he gets in a little bit of trouble because the fame that he achieves with The Raven he goes a little too far in some of the social circles and enjoys the attention just a little too much and gets in a little bit of hot water. But had he been able to continue, again, he dies at 40. People were interested in him, would purchase tickets to come and see him speak. But you could also see different times where he's got some self-sabotage going on, likely struggling with alcohol, some depression. His wife had died and he was just coming out of mourning, just looking like he was about to turn a corner when he passes away. And so
now during some of these tough times, you're saying The Raven's written 4 years before his death. So he was in some dark times. His wife passes away. There could be some alcoholism. Is this scene affecting his work, or he's just one of these Hemingway type of people that like, I'm going to go at it hard and still turn out classics?
Well, I think Hemingway's a great example of a young man's ability to do that, right? And it kind of wearing on you later. There are years of sobriety for Poe where it doesn't appear like he's drinking very much at all. But then there are years where drinking is affecting his employment, his relationships. We see this in contemporary letters. We see this at the time and this kind of struggle. and the typical fight that comes from the drinker saying, oh, well, it's not that I'm drinking a lot, it just doesn't take very much to get me, or I was just depressed and that's over now. And alcoholism is it's still such a taboo thing. Addiction is still such a taboo thing because so many people confuse it for a moral failing. And that's very true in Poe's day. Whereas we understand it's a disease and have a more sophisticated understanding of it as a disease, but it's still hard to get that image out from people. So you have the pendulum swinging one way or another. Like people say, dismiss him as a drunk, and oh, well, he was just, a drunk talent, and that's what made him good. And you've got people going the other way saying, oh, no, he never touched a drop of alcohol. He was allergic to alcohol. He had a special allergy that made him particularly susceptible. And that's, likely not true either. Might be true, but the truth is likely that he would have struggled with what we would understand as addiction now. And some years of sobriety and some years where it just decimated his life.
Like so many people, now struggling, but it's probably the moral police back then were probably hiding some things in their closets as well as they're judging him of your moral shortcomings.
Right. Well,
as they're taking a nip every night and going to bed just fine.
Right. Well, as true, because we've been talking about, as a critic, he made some enemies. People don't like it when you say that kind of stuff about him. And so Poe is this very famous example of people at the end of a celebrity's life kind of really behaving quite badly. There were people who, once Poe was dead and couldn't defend himself, took the opportunity to really savage him. Rufus Griswold is the most famous example of what we would call a frenemy, kind of taking advantage. He becomes Poe's literary executor and writes really nasty stuff about Poe that to this day has to get raked out of his history, that Poe was insane or had incestuous relationships with every female member of his family, and like all this other craziness. Poe was dead. He couldn't defend himself. And again, that persona of Poe's writing confused with the man himself, he becomes this kind of rock star image. And as fun as that image can sometimes be too, the truth is other, but it's just as strange as the fiction. So
it's kind of funny looking at, I guess, how we view celebrities now, or, said rock stars now. And then sometimes some of that debauchery adds to their legend. And you're like, this is amazing. Like they threw 10 TVs out of a hotel. And now, like, imagine you're at that hotel. You're like, why are they making so much noise? Why are their TVs flying? Like you wouldn't be able to handle any of it. And Edgar Allan Poe, I'm reading through and checking it out, and I'm here to say that I thought he died a drunk and a madman and all these things. I remember reading it somewhere, but it turns out that it's this frenemy writing his obituary and then writing, I guess, one of his only authorized biographies that nobody was there to refute or do anything, and apparently he made up a lot of it, or had a lot of the writer's leniency. I'm trying to think of another phrase, but
yeah, he took a lot of liberties, but he wasn't. Sadly, he wasn't the only one. Baltimore, of course, is the city where Poe died, and like you said, there's a lot of belief that Poe died in the gutter, or that he was murdered, or lots of other fun conspiracy theories about what killed Poe. It is a bit of a mystery, but even Poe's doctor, the physician that was present when Poe dies, he dines out for the rest of his life talking about the last days of Poe. And what starts out as a simple death in the hospital turns into deathbed speeches, extra symptoms. He goes on tour. He writes a book. He becomes the mayor of a small town outside of Baltimore. The doctor, really capitalizes on the celebrity, this intense interest in Poe, and that. So Poe's death is as much a mystery because we don't know the cause of death. And part of that's because the doctor's account changes over time because it suited his purposes to sort of change his story as time went on. So it's, life and death and literature. I think Poe's death is still a mystery. Again, as the inventor of the detective story, he might find that pretty fitting. But it is a shame that a lot of what is believed about Poe, which is unfortunate, is pervasive.
It's funny that as more things change, they stay the same. That's like celebrity culture of how can I cash in on once they're dead. And, the doctor, the physician going around, and since he was the last, I guess he did the autopsy, wherever it might have been, but then people want to know, like, oh, you have the last detail that you could tell me of this person that I'm following. And as you said, like, it just behooves him to keep building this story and building it more. And, Poe's last words were Reynolds. And then, now there's, what does that even mean?
Right. That's it hasn't hurt Poe's popularity.
Yeah, for me, believe it, I would have recited back to you lies, and it didn't hurt at all. That I'm like, oh no, I've read a bunch of Edgar Allan Poe. That's great. Guy was a madman at the end. Who doesn't love that?
Yeah, exactly. And some of it, I'm sure, was personally galling for the people who loved him and knew him. But on the other hand, he's now immortal, for better or for worse. But the writing still endures, and I think that's the important thing. As much as we do talk about Poe, and he is a pop culture figure and an icon, the writing still gets people. And what else could you ask for?
Yeah, as I say, he still comes up in pop culture. His writings on his own remain very popular. And a few years ago, it was called I believe it was The Following, and it was a TV show with Kiefer Sutherland. Kevin Bacon. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes. Those of us who love Poe, it was a little bit to see this whole murderous philosophy attributed to Poe and this justification for like serial murder on a mass scale. It was a little weird. But no, he does keep showing up. And for different generations, my generation of kids, saw Poe in The Simpsons, in like The Raven and The Simpsons, and like this next generation of kids, like watching Wednesday on Netflix. Like, nothing about Wednesday really is about Poe, and yet you've got Poe references all over that show, and it's so great. Christian Bale and Harry Melling just did a movie called The Pale Blue Eye. So Poe is in that too. And then coming up, we've got The House of Usher from Mike Flanagan, and Luke Skywalker's going to be in it. Mark Hamill's going to be in it. So it's Poe is everywhere, and it's always fun to see that.
I like that you said that, your generation, I think we're probably the same generation, The Simpsons and Edgar Allan Poe. But then currently the newest generation can still say The Simpsons because it's been on for, we're getting up to like 30 something years. It's crazy.
Yes, that's true.
It's funny. There's
South
a bunch
Park
of
had Poe too. A whole bunch of,
still on for South Park too.
Yep.
Yeah. My little rant. So people are, oh, do you watch The Simpsons? Get random conversations with friends or strangers. Like, oh, do you watch South Park? It's like, I watched it for 5 or 10 years and in the 90s, and then like, oh no, I'm talking about the episode last month. I have no idea.
How is that possible?
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
At the time, I would have said a huge Simpsons fan, and now looking back, I'm like, oh, I only followed 10% of their career. I have no idea what's happening.
Well, when Wednesday actually came out, my phone, it was like almost like a slot machine. My phone was just like text after text after text. Have you watched Wednesday? Have you seen it? Poe's in it. And then a Eurovision too. I think it was the team from Austria. They did a Who the Hell is Edgar song based on Poe, and there's a whole dance that goes with it. So for Poe House, this is wonderful. It is so cool to see all these references and to see this new group of kids that come in. They're like, what is this? And this is how it happens. And that's a lot of fun.
I think it's good. Obviously, it's good for the Poe House, but so I think this is good for this generation. He invented the detective story. He has these emo goth motifs that he's following. And in current literature, I'm not reading every single book that comes out, but you look at then, like, compare that to a Stephen King. You can read Edgar Allan Poe and you can pretty much go to sleep at night and not have horrible nightmares. Or you can read Stephen King, and depending which book it is, you might not go to sleep for a couple of days, or you might be wondering about like what's happening in the corner over there. And for that type of book, for Edgar Allan Poe to still leave a little of the imagination type of saying, like for people to sit there and take that in, instead of Stephen King like painfully detailing, people being gutted open or whatever it might be.
Well, I would prefer to you too, though, that, you could open up just about any Stephen King story and you'll find a Poe reference. He makes no bones about loving Poe and being inspired by Poe. And so I love Stephen King, and graphic stuff notwithstanding, Stephen King understands, just as Poe did. He takes this lesson that there are some very resonant things that will stay with you. And it's actually not even so much the graphic description of them, but just the truly chilling nature of leaving someone to suffocate and die alive behind a brick wall, or to be buried alive, or to melt into a pile of goop in a bed. Like these are, they do keep you up once you really understand what's happening and the
As I
true
say, I
depth
guess
of it.
that's true. If you start thinking about it more, like Stephen King explains it to you in what's happening, where Edgar Allan Poe leaves it for your mind to then continue to think about, like, what's that actually like being locked, buried behind a brick wall, buried alive behind a
Well,
brick wall.
to defend Stephen King, I mean, they're both, they write these perfect short stories that have that really have this impactful gut punch that sometimes it even takes a little while to, like, it hits you in waves. And I've read a lot of Stephen King stories where that actually happens, and there's a subtlety in it, the subtlety or slyness of evil that King is very, very good about. And you see a little bit of that in the cold calculation or the cold malice of a murderer or psychopath. In The Telltale Heart, for instance, I was never so kind to the old man than the entire week before I killed him. It's like, oh, that's chilling. This is horrible. That smiled in his face and he knew nothing. And then he's like, next page, chopping him up into pieces. So it's cool. I'm smiling and laughing through it, but it's actually pretty scary.
Just the nice, like the play on words. It's just, he has a great way of putting a sentence out there for you to think about and then keep reading, and then for it to gnaw in the back of your mind to then, register what he's actually saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Stephen King does too. If Mr. King is listening, I think you got it too, sir. So
if Mr. King is listening, none of this was a knock on him. This was just more a Edgar Allan Poe. I felt left more for you to think about it, where Stephen King can do that in short stories and has written in some of that extensive detail.
He can smack you in the face with it too. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Stephen King. Yes.
There was a Gerald's Game, I think it was a Stephen King book. And that, if I think about that book now, that still gives me like a hard time, where this husband and wife were went on a little getaway on a cottage, and then the woman is chained to a bed, and then the husband dies, and then in and out of consciousness, this woman thinks she sees somebody in the corner of the room, and then she would fade out of consciousness and wake up and wasn't there. So it was a little bit, is she going mad? Is she not? And, I guess there's no spoilers 20 years later, but there was somebody in her room, and it was pretty frightening. And just, you don't have to get into the whole situation, how she got there, but there's a lot of things of just thinking, like, if you were handcuffed somewhere, like, how do you get your hand out of that? And she tried everything to get her hand out, but it's just, some of it just really sticks there.
Right. One word, degloving. But that story is very Pit and the Pendulum-esque. You've got that first person hurt, like you've got this person enduring this, you're in their brain with them while they're enduring what they're experiencing. And that's Poe, that's Stephen King, like in that these two things together. So Stephen King's been pretty, explicit about Poe being this inspiration for him, and you see it. And he's very loving about it. It's pretty cool.
And for Poe, describing somebody being buried alive, and I've read that several times through high school and college and on my own, and never really thought twice about it. But then the movie Casino, it has Joe Pesci, and they're out in the desert, and his brother is like half beaten to death and buried alive. I saw that once. I'm done with, like, I can't watch it if it comes on USA or TBS or whatever, and people love it and they bring it up. It's seen as so disturbing to me. I don't want to watch it anymore. But yet I could go reread the Edgar Allan Poe part of it. Maybe visually versus reading, it's different for me. I don't know.
Yeah, for some folks, I think probably there's that level of it hits a little different. Like once I was talking to somebody about this the other day too, though, about, as you mentioned, Poe's going to be assigned in, middle school, high school. It's the kind of stuff that keeps you awake in English class. Then as you experience more, my experience has been that as I've gone through life, and I clearly remember reading my first Poe story, even my first Stephen King story. Like I remember those things, and just again being kind of gleeful about all of that, the darkness of it, and kind of indulging in that. But there's this promise of emotion, like you don't have a true sense of it yet. And then as I've gotten older, coming back to Poe, I see more layers. So you see the humor, you see pain, and that fear. When you're young, right? You're not afraid of anything, not really. Or you're afraid of everything in this very sort of surface way. And then you go through life and you really understand pain. I don't want to say that young people don't experience pain fully, but as an adult, you have more of a sense of what it's truly done. And have more of an appreciation of the bitter. And yeah, like I come back to Poe and stories that I haven't read for a while, and they always I find them to continue to be impactful, just because of more life experience.
Right. It's, not to diminish anybody's pain or what's not or not, real, but typically, the younger people, their pain, it's like compounded as you get older. You're like, oh, I'm not going to be with my 8th grade high school boyfriend, girlfriend anymore. Like, really? Did you really think you were going to be? Like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, rarely anybody is. But, them, that's like earth shattering, end of the world. But then as you get older and you're building that on, then you whatever it might be. And you add mortgages and you add kids and you add jobs and salaries, and it just gets and loss and love and things like that. Real things. I'm sitting here talking about superficial things like, oh, then my sneakers got dirty. I'm so terrible. Yeah, but as you add, loss and love and these other things and trying to make ends meet and like real decisions, like real decisions that come up, it makes it a little more difficult. And if you go back and read it, you can appreciate it more. And now that you're saying, I should go back as an adult, and I probably haven't read 10, 15 years. Not that I was an adult then, but now, as we talked about, compounded pain. I'm ready for it more.
Experience, like you notice more. Certainly, you're spending a little more time with it. I think though too, as an adult, you might have had this experience too. Like sometimes you don't realize how deeply something has hurt or changed you until you get that distance from it. So, like you said, a young person's notion of that pain, when you're young, you can actually bounce back a little bit from it or heal, or think you've healed, but that actually you're really just kind of scabbing over and healing over that. And then as an adult, you find more of that buried pain, and it can be a revelation, like how deeply you were hurt and where that comes from. In literature, like whether it's books, movies, the kind of cathartic kind of works, draw that out. And you're sitting there raw and not quite realizing what just happened. And then you're like, oh, that's a great thing that literature can do for you. Art can do for you. Reveal these things about yourself as you're taking in from someone else. So it sounds religious, but this is what I do for a living. So I'm a convert. This is what I do.
I think it's great. And definitely different types of work speak to different people. There's people, there's bands that people swear by that like, I'll listen to it for 2 minutes. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, how did that make that connection with you? But Edgar Allan Poe, I would say in general, this isn't, you're not off on some one hit wonder managing the house that they grew up in. I think you're on the right side of history here. I think you're backing a winner. So that's good. And it's nice that you're very passionate about what you do. And, that was gonna be about a joke question I had for you is like, do you like Edgar Allan Poe, or does this happen to be like a job that you scored and you're like, oh, I'm going to keep it. This is good.
Yeah, you even like this guy. Yeah, it's funny. What I found is people are very like, I feel passionate about Poe, but I've met some folks that are just, whoa. I've met some scholars who clearly have devoted their entire lives to Edgar Allan Poe and the study of his work and even the study of the man's history. And they're fascinating folks, but also it's almost monastic. Their calling devoted to another writer's work. Yeah, I love my job. I don't know that I could do that. So I meet some very passionate folks. They're always a great pleasure to sort of see how they're deeply impacted in different ways and take it a different direction. Some wonderful artists. That's a great thing about the festival too. You're bringing together a lot of really cool, creative people who all like the same thing, and you already have something in common, and just have a really good time enjoying that community. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can imagine the independent artwork spun off of Poe's readings and people's interpretations could be, exciting and fun to see, and how it reacts to their people's experiences.
Yes. And he's public domain, so everybody gets a piece, and everybody can do some cool stuff.
Hence how we had the following with Kevin Bacon, that it was public domain.
That's right. I did like that show.
I think I watched it for 2 seasons. The first season, I think the idea started off great, and I was hooked. Like, oh, this is gonna be really good. And I remember maybe it was like Super Bowl or whatever, they were showing previews coming up soon. It was like, wow, this show's gonna be pretty cool. And then I watched the first season. I was kind of on board, and then just slowly I just faded off. I have no idea how it ended, but that's also me with
most happen to shows. Right. Yeah. It was, startlingly violent, but James Purfoy, I'd seen him in other movies, like Kevin Bacon. Love Kevin Bacon. If Mr. Bacon, if you're listening, love your work. James
You're welcome
Purfoy.
to the podcast too, Mr. Bacon. Please come on the podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Yep.
James Purfoy was amazing in that, and I've been a fan ever since. And so he was also in Altered Carbon, the first season of Altered Carbon. And guess who's in Altered Carbon? Chris Connor as Edgar Allan Poe. So that was awesome. That was absolutely awesome too.
This all ties back for you.
It does. The Poe is everywhere. The power of Poe is really cool. My husband keeps introducing himself as married to the woman who's married to Edgar.
He's like, I'm the other man in the relationship. How's this happening?
The other man, exactly.
Yeah, that's funny.
But yeah, no, it's just Poe's everywhere. And yeah, you have to like it. But yes, I have seen Wednesday, so people stop texting me.
That's funny. And then public domain, just as a little offshoot here, is just funny on its own. That I was at a family party and Winnie the Pooh's public domain. Okay, I guess so. And they just made a horror movie about it where Winnie the Pooh decides to go down a dark path. I was like, what is happening here? But
that one hurt my feelings. I'm like public domain and all that. That one hurt my feelings that they did that, but okay.
Yeah, I feel like, just public domains kind of like take your own little spin on it. Maybe not. We don't need the backstory of how he went dark and things got tough. But hey, I guess that's out there. There's something for everybody.
I used to sit back about that. Well, I do sit back about it. I mean, people do what they want and everything like that. The other time that the Winnie the Pooh murder movie hurt my feelings, I won't see it. And then I remember reading a Sherlock Holmes book where the writer, I don't remember the title of the book. I deliberately blacked it out, so I'm going to spoil it for everybody, but I don't know which one it is. But the writer made Sherlock Holmes Jack the Ripper.
Oh.
And that hurt my feelings too. So.
You can't take public domain and then just ruin it. Like, that's not what it's there for. It's not for you to destroy
but
it.
They do, and they will, and it's all you can do. Everybody gets a piece, but I decline.
So Edgar Allan Poe, he passed away in October. We have this festival in October. October's Halloween, obviously, right? Do we have any Poe ghost stories? Is there Poe haunting anywhere? Is he in Baltimore, still roaming some of the old bars he would go to?
Well, of course, there are the legends and the stories. I will tell you my official statement on this matter as the director of the Poe House. I personally have not experienced any phenomena, but stuff happens around me, to people around me all the time. I have, oddly, and not on purpose, I have worked in some of the most haunted buildings in the United States. I lived in Savannah, Georgia. I did the books of Moon River Brewing Company and it was the oldest hotel in History Channel declared that building was haunted building in America. Nothing happened to me there. I worked in a cemetery late at night, some evenings, nothing. Like I lived in an apartment building that had literally been built on top of an old cemetery. And again, this stuff happens around me all the time to people, but not to me. And my husband teases me, like, the ghosts know you want them to talk, to you. So they're just like, whatever, they don't need to, like, you can't sit with us kind of thing. But it has never happened to me. But you will see stories just about everywhere, not just in Baltimore where Poe was buried, but other places where he was that insist that Poe haunts the building or something like that. So I don't know. I'm open to the idea, but no personal experience with it.
I love that you just live in all these haunted places and nothing is happening. It's like, oh, that's not haunted at all. What are you talking about?
Knock on wood. Like, no, they don't ever talk to me. And so I'm like a rock, nothing, no antenna, no phenomena antenna for me. So
have there ever been a published piece by Edgar Allan Poe that was claimed to be by him that then had to be retracted, that ended up found that there was a forgery? This is early 1800s, mid 1800s. People weren't posting on IG that, hey, I just wrote this new book, come pick it up. It wasn't on Amazon to get delivered the next day. So maybe chain of custody of books could have been a little shady and anything like that.
There were, like, you'd have to go to eapoe.org. It's the Edgar Allan Poe Society of Baltimore. They have a list of things attributed to Poe that ended up not being so. What complicates the matter is, again, Poe is magazine editor. And so he's contributing to the magazine. And sometimes he's writing under different names to make the magazine look more full. They might have been short some material, or some things are being attributed to different editors, or that Poe wrote, or stuff like that. So you do have a couple of things. And then once Poe dies, Rufus Griswold makes some changes that have been identified as not likely Poe. It's just Rufus Griswold being a jerk. So nothing comes to mind, but there is a history of different pieces and different quotes in this age of, quick quotes about Poe. I'm guilty of this too. I'll need a quote and I'll just Google, what did Edgar Allan Poe say about friendship or whatever. There's a lot of stuff attributed to Poe that he never said. So she's not that into you. Poe didn't say that. Or let's see, a couple of other ones. I'm drinking ale today. It was actually my favorite one, but it might not have been said by Poe. So stuff like that. So there is a list that go to eapoe.org and you'll find it. But the big stuff, the cool stuff, Telltale Heart, Pit and the Pendulum, all of those are Poes. They're really Poes. I promise.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So one of my favorite things now, living in, the technological age that we do, and, the madness of Facebook or whatever, is just the sad celebrity picture and then some quote that obviously they didn't say at all. And then people just reposting it. Like The Rock didn't have, I find that so strange. For people's need to then post that, I don't know. I need Dr. Drew on the show to analyze people on why you would think that was a good idea.
It's easy to click and repeat, especially if something sounds good. I think Mark Twain is really misquoted. He said a whole bunch of really clever stuff, but not all of the stuff that's out there. And yeah, that happens.
Yeah. I think the Benjamin Franklin's, that beer proves that God loves us. I saw something that said that he may not have said that.
That would have been the one, right?
Yeah, but you know what? Maybe you should stop doing your research then, buddy. That's a great quote. Leave it to him. The man's on $100 bill. Are you? That's the end of the story.
Yes. No, I think probably we've all been guilty too of retweeting or reposting something that we don't really know if they said, but yeah.
So Poe's greatest critic, Rufus Griswold, he becomes owner of Poe's work after he passes away. And then he writes his eulogy, and it's a scathing eulogy, and it goes around the country and people are reading this. And then there's the things about the alcoholism and madness that are attributed to his writings and his biography. Why didn't he destroy his work more? It seems like he left a lot of it intact. You said there were some changes they were able to identify, but it seemed like at this time in history, where there isn't this great chain of custody of things, why didn't he just cancel him, delete him?
Well, his work was already out there. Edgar Allan Poe was one of the early proponents of copyright, too, because he saw his work published over and over without any money coming to him. He saw translated internationally without any money coming to him. This is something he complained about, because this is a man who received about $40 for the first publication of The Raven. He's writing for magazines, which they're shorter pieces, poems, easy to just yoink. And I think it was a publishing model where, because it was so difficult to police it, you might have American printers republishing books, printing books from Europe that they probably did not have permission and should not have been. But how's anybody, what are you going to do about it? So they could sell this stuff, make a lot of money, and nobody could come after them. So Poe was out there. Poe was published. Because he's a magazine writer too, he's almost getting published almost as quickly as he's writing. He's not sitting on a hoard of things like Emily Dickinson. So some things could have been destroyed if they remained unpublished. But Poe, because he was kind of short on money too, there were very lean years for an adult Edgar Allan Poe. And so he needed to make the money almost as quickly as he could write the words. So I doubt there was a lot of stuff being held back because of Poe's financial situation.
So no hidden manuscript underneath the Philadelphia house, the museum that they have. I'm not going to go over there.
There are claims.
Okay.
There are claims of different things, and I think it's harder to forge things these days. But at the same time, it's not that it doesn't happen, and it hurts people's feelings when they think they've found something special. And
you're like, oh, sorry, it wasn't. Sorry.
No, it is fascinating. The desire to change, or the desire to Rufus Griswold, if his desire was to obliterate Poe's reputation, he failed miserably. He got people even more interested. I can't be sorry for that. But what's tough about writing in manuscripts, writers out there, you're never finished. You're always rewriting. Poe is no exception. Like, he's revising different times, changing phrases as different things go to publication, different things changing like that too. We know, for instance, with The Mystery of Marie Roget, Poe is writing kind of parallel to a true crime that's going on that had happened in New York, and the coverage of that case is ongoing, and Poe wanted to put forward his theory of the crime. So he's writing this story, but then 1 month before publication, that story, the public begins to accept one theory of the crime. So Poe very quickly had to change his ending. And what happened to the original version, that story is out there. So it's kind of, writers do change their work, and it's a little bit like artists too. You're never finished noodling. You're never quite done. So you have different versions of things that reach publication, and editors can change things too.
Right. That's interesting for him to change the end of the story to go with what the public wanted at that time.
Right.
Who do you see now? Not, Edgar Allan Poe, but is there anybody you're reading currently that gives, the same short story or poem vibes that he had? Is there somebody you'd recommend that people pick up that's similar?
I'm a big fan of Dennis Lehane. He wrote Mystic River, and a beautiful, speaking of short stories, beautiful collection of short stories I read every year called Coronado. Just wonderful. Talk about, that heartbreak in a story that just kind of lingers. Dennis Lehane does that very, very well. Completely off subject. I love Diana Gabaldon, her entire Outlander series.
My wife likes the TV show. Big Stars fan over there. Yeah,
well, I like the TV show too, quite a bit. The books are amazing. If people are interested in The Pale Blue Eye was made into a film, but the book made me ugly cry. That's just a beautiful, beautiful book. That one of my absolute favorites. That's by Louis Bayard. He's really, really great. So if you want a story with a young Edgar Allan Poe when he was a cadet at West Point, it's completely fake. Nothing about it is true. Some points of Poe's biography that are sort of dramatized in the book, but it's a wonderful book. But those are my favorites.
We live in the age of the multiverse, so everything is true. Don't worry. Somewhere on some timeline that happened completely.
So Poe is still alive. He's still writing.
Yeah, that's it. There's definitely a Spider-Verse timeline. Yeah. So bring him in for Spider-Man 3. I'm excited for it. Yeah. All right. So October, we have Poe Fest.
Yes.
All
The
right.
International Edgar Allan Poe Festival. 2 days. Again, lots of events around that as well. Very, very fortunate to announce a new sponsor in Wells Fargo Bank. I've got some really exciting stuff planned. And if you can't make the festival this year, consider coming out next year, because next year is the 75th anniversary of the Edgar Allan Poe House as a museum. And so it's going to be a really big year. So but please come out both years, every year.
Come every year. Don't just stop for this year or next year. Every year. Yeah.
Every year.
Just a short drive. I mean, 2 hours, 2.5 from New York City down, Philadelphia area. This is easy to get to for a lot of people on the East Coast. Great time of year. October, weather's perfect.
Clearly, you get great traffic, because anytime I try to drive to New York, it's like 4 hours, 5 hours. How fast do you drive, Brian?
Probably too fast. I go with the flow of traffic. And you know what? If you get ahead of the people, then you can't get rear-ended by them or sideswiped. So that's my
you drive to Baltimore at 2 o'clock in the morning, you will make the times that Brian just quoted.
Yeah, you are fine. Yeah. Yeah. So New York City to Baltimore may be a little off. But Philadelphia area to Baltimore, that's not too far off.
But we have a lot of really, really fun events planned. The Poe and Comics exhibit is a lot. We're really, really proud of this exhibit that will be at Westminster Hall. We will have original art from Richard Corbin's estate at that exhibit. We have lots of classic comics. The Poe Museum in Richmond is contributing some art for the exhibit as well. We have some contemporary artists, Gareth Hines, Dwight McPherson. So if you want to see some really, really cool Poe in comics, everybody loves comics these days. So come on out for that. And then just a lot of really fun events. And it is, again, a free event. So you don't have to spend anything. Just come on down to Poe Fest and enjoy the stage and the music and just hang out. The costumes. We're going to have a Poe raid this year. And a lot of people, the way people dress up and stuff, it's really a lot of fun. So come on out.
I love it. That's great. Is there any roads we haven't covered? Do you want to go down any other paths?
Oh, one more. If there are creators out there, it is called the International Edgar Allan Poe Festival and Awards. So we have the Saturday Visitor Awards. They honor a new generation of artists and writers inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. The awards call for entries open in January and Poe's birthday every year. Deadline to enter is May 30th. We've just announced the official nominees for the festival this year. We announced the winners at the Black Cat Ball at the festival in October, but the Saturday visitors were named for an award that Edgar Allan Poe himself won while he was living at Amity Street in Baltimore, where the museum is. And if there are any creators who are inspired by Poe or adapting Poe, we want to see the best work, best art from creators, keeping Poe in popular culture today. So
awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yes. We've got some nominees this year from Luxembourg and from England, and a lot of really, really cool folks from just about everywhere. Canada coming in, all over the United States who've entered works, and I'm really excited about the nominees this year. But if anybody wants to participate at the festival and you are a creative, consider the Saturday Visitor Awards.
What is the best way for people to follow the festival, the Edgar Allan Poe House and Museum, social medias, anything like that?
Sure. So Everything Festival is at poefestinternational.org. That is the festival website, and you'll have the links to our program for the this year's event, as well as the link to any of the paid ticketed events. If you want to follow anything about Poe House, though, we're Poe Baltimore on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, / whatever they're calling themselves these days. Coming out for that. Will be streaming some of the festival on our YouTube channel. If you want to see more of it, we need more subscribers. So click subscribe button. Everything about Poe Baltimore, poebaltimore.org. You'll see about the museum, about our programming, what we do, and how to keep our chamber door open to visitors all over the world.
Awesome. That's great. And since you mentioned Twitter and X now, I have to say something about it. And Elon Musk, if you are listening, you're welcome on the program as well. But no matter how you feel about him, you can't rebrand. You cannot rebrand. It is Twitter. It is tweeting. It is not X and then X. Well, I don't know what it is, but it's Twitter and tweet. Like Elon Musk, come on, man. You got to fix it. Not too late.
You want me to what now? You want me to X now? It sounds vaguely indecent. I don't know.
It sounds very indecent. Yeah. And when my kids are telling me whenever I give them the cell phone, I'm going to freak out before I slow down. Like, whoa, oh, okay, you're just tweeting. And they're like, okay, boomer. You know what? I don't want to hear it. I
admire all these people who are swearing off social media. I have to stay on social media for work. It would be nice to just no, we're on all the channels. So
when I go on vacation, it is the best how many ever days or week, whatever it might be, because I'm rarely on any of the stuff. And no one makes me go on this, but like I go on this, get show ideas and to keep up with the news. But then I'm like so into it, and then it just it's just the insanity. I don't know. It's like self-abuse that I'm enjoying. I'm not sure what's happening.
Self-abuse that I'm enjoying. Yes. It's pretty criminal how much time disappears into it, but yeah.
It's nuts. But Enrica, thank you so much for coming on. I truly appreciate it. You're a friend of the program, so we're gonna push your stuff out when you have it. We'll let people know all the websites and IG and all that stuff you put in there. I'll put in the show notes so it's easy for people to follow. But anything good you guys have coming out, I'm going to follow you guys on social media. I'll help you, spread the word and get that out too. So I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. And thanks for this conversation.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you at the festival. Yes.
I'm going to try for this year, but if not 75th, I don't see why not. I can definitely make that happen. Or every year. Why stop?
Every year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. All right, everyone. That was our show. Don't forget to leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you stream your podcast. Like and follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date in all things wild and weird. Check out the links in the show notes for more information on our guest. The biggest support you can offer is to tell everyone about the podcast. Until next time.